Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a really fascinating legend from the village of Ramgar. We're looking at the story of a boy whose brain, frankly, worked way, way harder than his body. It's a classic tale of wit, deception, and, as you'll see, a very unique brand of justice. Right off the bat, you kind of have to ask yourself, how does someone who literally refuses to lift a finger end up taking down ruthless merchants and, spoiler alert, an actual serial killer? Because let me tell you, this isn't just some simple children's fable. It is an absolute masterclass in psychological manipulation. So let's dive into this and see how absolute laziness evolves into vigilante brilliance.
Section 1. Introduction to Ladoo Ram. Okay, so our story kicks off in Ramgar, and we meet an elderly mother who is just at her wit's end. I mean, while all the other kids in the village are out studying or working, her son, Ladoo Ram, well, he takes a very different approach to life. She constantly scolds him, saying, "All day you just break the bed," which, is just a really colorful way of saying the kid lies around doing absolutely nothing. She loves him, for sure, but she's terrified for his future, mainly because anytime he actually tries to help out, total disaster strikes.
But here is the really fascinating contrast we need to talk about. His physical laziness, it perfectly masks this incredibly sharp, cunning mind that is constantly observing everything around him. He actually deeply loves his mother, and he hates seeing her struggle with their meager belongings, like this tiny cauldron that constantly burns her hands when she cooks. He desperately wants to help her. He just absolutely refuses to do any physical labor to make it happen. And that brings us to his very first con. Section 2. The Cauldron's Bizarre Birth. To get his mother a new pot, Ladoo visits his naive, wealthy friend, Lalulal. Seeing a massive, shiny new cauldron there, Ladoo formulates this brilliant plan to acquire it for free by totally exploiting his friend's greed. Let's walk through this timeline. Day 1, Ladoo borrows the big cauldron. Day 3, he returns it, but he brings along a second, much smaller cauldron. He actually tells Lalulal that the big pot gave birth while it was at his house. Now, Lalulal thinks Ladoo has completely lost his mind, but hey, he eagerly accepts the free baby pot anyway. Fast forward to day 5, Ladoo borrows the big cauldron again. But on day 12, he comes back with some terrible news. Ladoo looks his friend dead in the eye and tells him the big cauldron tragically passed away. It died. Lalulal is absolutely furious. He starts screaming out in the street like, how can a metal object die? It's completely absurd. But you see, this is exactly what Ladoo wanted. He has set his trap perfectly, right in front of the gathering village crowd. And here is the crucial point. Laloo's initial greed for that free baby cauldron completely traps him in Ladoo's flawless, albeit totally ridiculous logic. Ladoo calmly turns to the crowd and says, "He happily accepted the baby when I said the cauldron gave birth, so why is he angry when I say it died?" The villagers listen, they kind of nod, and they agree. Lalulal is forced to walk away totally empty-handed. Ladoo secures the big cauldron for his mother, basically proving that greed makes people incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. Section 3. A deal for a hut. The stakes really escalate when Ladoo's friend Buktu visits the village, and he's super depressed after being scammed by a deceitful butcher named Kalwa. The butcher had bought Buktu's horse for 100 rupees, but then maliciously interpreted the deal to mean everything on it, essentially stealing 100 precious cotton sheets that were strapped to the saddle. Well, Ladoo immediately marches over to the butcher shop. Check out the comparison here. Ladoo uses the exact same malicious wordplay right back at the butcher. He walks in and asks for a price on all the heads in the shop. The butcher, thinking he's making an easy 25 rupees on some leftover goat heads, happily agrees. But once they're packed up, Ladoo calmly demands that the butcher hand over his own head. Oh, and his brother's head too, since technically speaking, they are heads in the shop. Caught in this terrifying, literal trap of his own making, the butcher is forced to get down on his knees and beg for his life in front of a massive crowd. Ladoo eventually spares his life, but only after the butcher returns the horse, the sheets, and the money. It goes to show that greedy deceivers are almost always entirely blind to their own tricks when those exact tricks are turned against them. Ladoo Ram is basically operating as a vigilante of semantics now. Section 4. The Deadly Mountain Trap.
Realizing he needs some legitimate work, Ladoo travels to the city and actually gets hired by a wealthy merchant named Japduram. But Japdu harbors a really dark secret. He takes Ladoo out to the base of a towering mountain and reveals a chilling, step-by-step trap. It's a literal process for murder. First, Joptu orders ladoo to lie on a buffalo hide, wraps him up tight, and hides. Then, a giant eagle swoops down, grabs what it thinks is an animal, and drops ladoo on the unreachable peak. Once ladoo breaks free up there, Joptu shouts up from the bottom, ordering him to throw down the precious gems scattered all over the peak. When ladoo asks how he's supposed to get down, Joptu chillingly just points to the human skeletons littering the rocks.
So, left for dead amongst the bones of all these previous job seekers, Ladoo is completely trapped. But remember, his mind is literally always working. When another giant eagle swoops down toward him, Ladoo doesn't freeze. No way. In this incredible feat of quick thinking, he grabs the eagle's legs and holds on tight. The bird, totally unable to handle his weight, slowly glides down to the ground. Ladoo lets go right before hitting the earth, surviving this absolutely impossible trap.
Section 5. The Ultimate Revenge.
Having survived that mountain of bones, Ladoo immediately plots his revenge. The very next morning, he returns to Joptu's mansion, but this time in disguise. He gets hired again, and Joptu obliviously takes him to the exact same mountain. But this time around, Ladoo plays the naive fool to absolute perfection. When he's told to lie on the hide, he feigns complete ignorance. Wait, how do I lie on it like this? Joptu, who is completely blinded by his impatient greed to just harvest more gems, decides it's faster if he just demonstrates it himself. The moment the serial killer lies down, Ladoo swiftly wraps him up, ties the hide tight, and just watches as the eagle carries the merchant up to his own graveyard.
Once on the peak, Joptu breaks out of the hide, looks down in terror, and suddenly realizes exactly who he is dealing with. He throws the gems down, frantically begging Ladoo to tell him the secret of how to escape the mountain. Ladoo calmly gathers up the massive wealth, looks up at the monster, and delivers this cold, calculated line, leaving the merchant to the exact fate he had forced upon so many others. I'm in a hurry. Ask the people you sent up here how I got down.
0. That is the exact number of innocent victims Japdu Ram will ever exploit again. Thanks to Ladoo Ram's vigilante justice, the cycle of murder on that mountain is permanently broken. Ladoo takes the gems and returns home to his mother, finally able to provide for her without ever having to break a bed with manual labor again.
We'll leave you with this final thought. Throughout this entire story, Ladoo Ram lies. He steals and he manipulates people. Yet, he's undeniably the hero of the tale. As you digest this explainer, ask yourself, is a trickster's deception justified when it takes down those who are totally blinded by their own malicious greed? It's a pretty fascinating moral gray area, right? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the stories you hear.